All right, everyone, welcome back. It's so great to connect with you and have our conversations offline as we were getting started. Welcome to Module G. This is our second to last module, and Jennifer and I are so excited to be your facilitators for Module G. I want to thank everyone for coming in and sitting down and getting into your materials. I also want to thank our tribal elders here in the community for starting us in a good way with that opening invocation and prayer. Thank you so much. Thank you again for attending. And before we get started, what I'd like for everyone to do is open up your participant workbook. And if you can go to G3. Great. I'm seeing some nodding. Folks are getting there. Uh, on G3, you will notice this prompt. What encouraging word or phrase would you like to remind your future self? So go ahead and take a moment and write those down. And as you get finished, feel free to share yours with an elbow partner or with someone at your small group table. All right. It looks like folks have had a chance to write and have some good conversations. Before we move on, can I get a volunteer to share what you either talked about with your elbow partner or what you wrote down in your workbook? Yeah, Natalie, please go ahead.
I wrote down that I can be curious about myself and my growth over time.
That's really beautiful. So poetic. Thank you so much. Can I get one more person who would be willing to share? Yeah, Deidre, please.
We talked about just the word boundaries, and an example that came up was like we can start sharing with our kids that they don't always have to like what we cook or say they like what we cook. It's okay for them to tell us, like, I didn't like the taste of this. And we don't have to take it personally, but we can respect their boundaries in future meal planning.
I love that. I love that you're bringing in things that we've talked about, really great discussions before. And I love that you're also bringing in communication, which is something we're going to talk more about in Module H. So thank you, thank you, thank you, everyone, for engaging in that activity. Before we go any further, I want to thank our hosts here who have sponsored our space and remind everyone of the restrooms, our emergency exits, and our shelter in place and evacuation locations, as well as any parking information that we need to know about. I also want to request silencing of mobile devices or other technology. And Jennifer and I have also silenced our own. I also want to remind folks we talked before about if we need to take a call or send a text, that's okay. We just don't want it to be distracting for other people. So taking that outside of that space. All right. So if you want to open up your workbooks now to page G2, and I'm going to be reviewing on the slide the information that's also listed there in your workbook as well, so you can follow along. All right. So in this module, you'll see that the goal of this module is to support a child's understanding and growth through storytelling, setting healthy boundaries, and practicing communication skills. Our learning objectives are the first, storytelling, identify how storytelling can teach lessons, boundaries, identify how games can be a tool of learning and communicate boundaries, and communication, identify and practice communication strategies, which actually Deidre already brought up such a great example of that already. I do want to, as we go to this next slide, draw your attention to the learning agreement from our Safe and Brave Spaces conversation that we still have up on the wall, and remind folks also of some of the learning agreement items that we agreed to that's on the slide. And I just want to again ask each time that we come back together, if you have anything to add to our learning agreement, and if you're still feeling like it's good to go, give me a thumbs up if you don't have anything that you want to add. Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. So it looks like everyone gave a thumbs up, so we're still okay. You'll notice one more time if we look over there at our learning agreement, right next to it is our parking lot. As a reminder, we want to make sure that our parking lot is empty at the end of each training. So if questions come up, If we move on from a conversation and you still have something lingering, or you're hoping that we get to something, a reminder, you have those Post-its on your table that you can make note of and put those Post-its in our parking lot. And Jennifer and I will make sure that we get answers to those. All right. So there's one more thing that I want to do before I tag in my co-facilitator, Jennifer, and that's do a quick review. So throughout our sessions thus far, we've discussed the concept that parenting challenges are common and that we need tools, resources, and supports for ourselves and for our children to help us navigate parenting. On this slide, we are going to play a game. And in a moment, I will reveal images that represent each of the concepts that we've discussed that are tools or resources for parenting. When I click to reveal each image, I want someone or multiple people to shout out the concept that we discussed related to it. And you can follow along in your workbook on page G3 and write down the correct answers. All right, so here we go. So go ahead, and if you would like, unmute yourself so you're ready to shout it out. Here is our first image.
It's the parent action plan.
It's a parenting action plan. Great job, Teresa. All right, here's our next one.
Is it self-care?
Yes, Natalie, you got it. Our self-care plan. Wonderful job. Here is our next image.
Was it parenting, networking, and resources?
You got it. And that was a trick one because there was two. Great job, Deidre. Parenting resources and parenting network. And we've only got one more.
The circle of support.
That is it. You all did a wonderful job. 100%. Tens across the board. Great job. We have begun to acknowledge that we all have parenting challenges. Some we have in common, and some are unique to us and our family and children. We also have different ways of seeking support in our parenting. We have tools that can help us begin to talk about our parenting in ways that keep us resilient. And in this module, we will explore teaching lessons, setting healthy boundaries, and practicing communication skills as a way to support a child's understanding. We will begin by talking about storytelling.
All right, thank you, Suzanne, and wonderful job, everybody, remembering all of those acronyms and names that we had for those different examples. So I'm excited to be here with you all. So if you would like, turn to page G4 of your participant workbook, if you could. Give you a moment to do that. All right, everybody ready? Thumbs up. Awesome. All right. So in this activity, we're going to discuss how the tradition of storytelling can be a useful tool in parenting our children, especially when talking about challenges or when things may become difficult. So in many of our tribes, a storyteller is also regarded as a knowledge keeper, passing on traditional values and life lessons to the next generation that captures both the attention and the imagination of the listener. All right. So can anyone share a story that they heard that helped them teach a lesson as a child? Teresa?
Yeah, I was thinking about the story about the tortoise and the hare. Reminded me of just rushing versus taking your time getting tasks done.
Wonderful. Thank you. Deidre?
Yeah, I was also thinking like there's a lot of bragging in kind of going back and forth in the story. And so it also like teaches humility.
Wonderful. Yes, a really good example with that. Natalie?
Yeah, I don't remember all the details of the story, but I still remember like slow and steady wins the race. I feel like that's something that I like took away from that, more about patience.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Wonderful examples of a story that helped to teach a lesson. Now, next question, why do you think storytelling is important, and how does storytelling teach us lessons? Deidre?
Well, now we can easily pick out a book and read to our kids, but I'm thinking like our grandparents, they didn't have that. So storytelling was a way of passing not just information, but like knowledge. And, as kids, I just thought of my grandparents' storytelling about their day or whatever happened as just a story. But now I look back and it did teach like kind of like our example earlier about the story like Natalie Carey's Slow and Steady. And I thought the first thing I thought of was humility. There's lessons embedded in them.
Exactly. Thank you for that. It passed on our culture, our traditions, the way we did things. All right, next question. So, what makes a good story or a storyteller? And hold on, when you see and hear a good story being told, what characteristics about the story or the storyteller come to mind? Natalie.
Well, I think like in general, part of it is how you tell the story. So I remember stories the most when they were really exciting and engaging, and maybe whoever was telling it kind of spoke in an exciting voice. But also it was usually using language that I could understand as a kid. And then I also think about like the content of the story, kind of like Deidre was saying. I think it stuck with me more if I understood how it like related to the world and what it was teaching me about culture and values and kind of how we should move through the world.
Thank you, Natalie. So again, wonderful examples of describing those attributes of what makes a good story and a good storyteller. And we can be good storytellers for our children too. Many of us already are. Many of you already use this skill in our parenting. So storytelling, it can be a powerful way that we convey messages. And we had some wonderful examples here about tradition, culture, humility, patience, and how we learn about our own cultures, how we're teaching lessons, how we parent our children. So for our homework for tonight, each of you will take some time to do a bit of storytelling ourselves. If you already have ideas about what stories you might want to share with your children that you haven't yet, write them down now so you don't forget. And you can put those on page G4 of your participant workbook. So now we're going to take some time and segue and discuss games and play. All right. So this video that we're going to watch here in just a moment is about 3.5 minutes or so, and it's titled The Navajo Stick Game. And this is a film by the Interdisciplinary Film and Digital Media program at the University of New Mexico. Now, in your workbooks on page G5, while we're listening and watching the video, please write down some examples of a rule or a boundary you notice while you are watching the Navajo Stick Game. So we'll take a moment and we'll watch our video now.
To begin, 40 rocks are put in a circle in groups of 10. Once that's complete, participants put their own unique game pieces at the starting point. Next comes the dice, and the game begins. The dice are 3 flat sticks. Each has a black side and a white side. After the sticks are tossed, the different combinations of black and white determines the amount of spaces a person's game piece advances. Ten allows for the greatest advancement of a player's game piece, while also permitting the individual to toss again. If a stick goes out of bounds, the person who tosses loses their turn and does not advance. The sticks represent the trees and plants on Earth. The game teaches counting while also encouraging socializing and friendship. The black on the stick represents night and the white represents day. In the beginning, this game, like the Navajo shoe game, was created and played in order to determine whether the world would be night or day. Since there was no declared winner, the Earth has both. The center represents Mother Earth. The gaps between the rocks represents the rivers found in the Third World during the Navajo people's emergence. If a player's game piece lands in the river, their piece must go back to the starting point. The crash of the sticks represents lightning, which is why this game is only played during the winter months.
All right, what a wonderful video, right? That was so fun to watch. So in this video, we saw a group of Native children playing a traditional Navajo stick game. The game has many traditional meanings and representations of Navajo beliefs throughout the course of the game. Even if you've never played this game before, what were some of the rules or boundaries you saw in the video that the children had to follow in order to play the game? Teresa?
What I appreciated was that the rules were clearly articulated, and so everyone kind of was starting at the same place and knew some of the expectations.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Teresa. Anyone else? Natalie.
I don't know if I remember it perfectly, but I think if you get one of the sticks out of the boundaries, you're kind of penalized for it. So maybe that's encouraging kind of softer play. And I also liked how like all the kids were counting together, so they were kind of keeping each other accountable to the rules.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes, we heard a little bit of she's cheating in there, right? All right. So what do you think would have happened if all the children were not playing by the same rules or boundaries? Deidre.
I think there would be like a lot of disagreements, maybe miscommunication. It wouldn't be a game. It'd just be a lot of chaos.
Yep, exactly. A lot of chaos, a lot of frustration too, as well. So thank you everybody for those examples. And again, just a neat video to watch all together. So playing games is a traditional way of teaching for many of our communities. And like most children's games, there's usually a set of rules or boundaries that have to be learned in order for the game to be played. When a part of the game is not followed or a rule is broken, there's usually a consequence, such as having to put your playing piece at the start again. So we're going to continue this discussion of boundaries on the next slide, and I'm going to turn it back over to my wonderful co-facilitator, Suzanne.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and great job. Really great discussion about that video around the Navajo stick game. So this slide is titled, What are Boundaries? And you can follow along again in your participant workbook on page G5. So what are boundaries? Boundaries can be different for everyone and shape our lives in different ways. For example, think of boundaries like streams of water. A healthy boundary might look like a stream between two people, with one person on each side of the stream. If one person crosses the stream, but it makes the other person feel scared, angry, frightened, or another uncomfortable feeling, we say a boundary has been crossed. Boundaries differ for different people. Some people's boundaries are wide and deep like a river, and others are tiny streams. In this next discussion, let's expand our understanding of the importance of boundaries with our children. For this activity, everyone will gather into 2 groups. Each group will be asked to discuss and answer the following question: what does a healthy versus an unhealthy boundary look like? And you're going to be writing your thoughts on chart paper. You also can follow along in your participant workbook on pages G5 and G6. All right. So I want you to think about, while you're working on this, that your definition of what a healthy versus an unhealthy boundary looks like should be written as though you're telling a child. You are going to have 5 minutes in your small groups, so please identify someone while you're working together who will be responsible for reporting out when time is up. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and come back together. And I just want to say, I have so appreciated going around the room. Jennifer and I were listening into conversations and looking at the chart papers that you all have put up on the wall about healthy and unhealthy boundaries. And I'm wondering if I can get a group who'd be willing to report out to the larger group about what they wrote down about definitions. And let's start with what a definition for a healthy boundary is. Yeah, Deidre, what'd your group talk about?
Um, our group, we had a lot of really great discussions, but one of the things that we kind of really focused on talking about was when there are clear expectations. Like that's a really healthy boundary. And we're talking about how, like, when our kids are comfortable telling us they don't want to hug people or they don't want other people hugging them outside of our nuclear family, that's a healthy boundary that we should maybe respect. Not maybe, we should.
Yes, that is so eloquently said. I love that you're talking about also bringing in that our children have boundaries too, and that it's a boundary that they're asking for us to support them in enforcing as a part of the way that we navigate being around other family and community members. Really, really great example. Yeah, please, Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, Deidre and I were in the same group, and we also talked about the flip side of that. What an unhealthy boundary might look like is coming into a room, maybe assuming that it's okay to hug everyone or anyone. And so just being able to not assume.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate you talking about that, and the impact that that might have if we make assumptions and overstep where there could be boundaries instead of creating space to be able to figure those things out. Really, really great job to all of the groups in the room. And I want to take the discussion a little bit further now and invite all of the groups to get back into your small group. And I'd like for you, you also can be writing these down on page G6 in your workbook. And I want you to continue to consider how we'd answer this next set of questions as though we were talking to a child. So the first question is, how do you know when a personal boundary has been crossed? What cues or signals do you experience? So go ahead and get back into your small groups, talk about that, come up with your answers, and jot those down on page G6 in your workbook. All right. Great conversations that everyone was having, and I saw lots of writing down. We're going to be going around the room and inviting everyone to share those examples that you all came up with. And so I'm wondering if I can get someone to start us off. Yeah, please, Natalie, go ahead.
I was in a group with Teresa and Deidre, and we took some notes. There was a lot of good conversation, but we were talking about how, like, when a personal boundary has been crossed, it's really different from person to person. So we might all like feel it differently, and the importance of telling that to our children. And we said that sometimes it's hard to like fully put into words, but it could just be a feeling that like something's not right. And sometimes that's a way for us to know that a boundary has been crossed. And we also talked about how like everyone has different cues and signals, but some might be in our bodies, some might be in how we're thinking or feeling. Like I know for me, my cheeks will get kind of flushed and I'll feel a little bit more shaky. And I might feel a little more resentment towards that person or more negatively about what happened. But there were a lot of good things that folks brought up.
I really appreciate the conversation that your group had, and many other groups are nodding. I'm seeing that it shows up differently. I saw a lot of nodding around that, that we all didn't agree that our cues were the same, but that they can show up in our body, they can show up in our thoughts, and that it can look different for each of us. Thank you for explaining that. And I just want to add on that it might take time to fully understand what our own boundaries are and why they exist in our lives. As we begin to discover what our boundaries mean, we can also establish effective ways to communicate with them. And so after our break, we are going to shift the conversation into communication skills and practice. And so, what we're going to be doing now is taking a 15-minute break. And so, I'll be putting on some music. Please enjoy going outside, talking with each other, and really taking some time for yourself. Great work so far.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you had a good break, took a little time for self-care, had some downtime. You probably checked your emails, maybe, or called your kids. I hope you just had a little bit of time for yourself. So today, in this next component, we are going to talk a little bit about communication. So if you would like to turn to page G6 of your workbook at the bottom, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about communication and the importance of how we deliver a message to our children and the impact it can have. This can also be considered a teaching moment. Now, I imagine we've had a lot of teaching moments, right? So did you know that almost every moment with our children can be an opportunity to teach a lesson? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about communication. As parents, we tend to prioritize when it comes to our children, their health, their safety, and their relationships that we have with them and their relationships to others in our family, and even their relationships within our community. And these areas are part of everyday communication with our children that we have. It can also be where storytelling, play, and our communication can be part of our parenting. So I'd like each of you to think of a time when your child was doing something healthy, safe, or being a good relative. How could you communicate to your child that you acknowledge what they're doing and encourage them to continue doing things like that in the future? I'll give you an example. Paying attention before crossing the road, or brushing their teeth without being asked before they go to bed, or taking good care of a family member. What are some examples that you might be able to share? Natalie?
I guess with like crossing the road, for instance, you could instead of if you notice that they're already doing it without you reminding them, you could be like, I love the way you did that. Like, awesome job thinking of your safety, or just kind of reaffirm what the value or the teaching is.
Exactly. Thank you, Natalie. Any other examples? Deidre?
Um, school just started for a lot of our communities. And over the summer, my kid learned how to bake. And now he wants to bake, like he's promising everybody a fresh baked cake. And at first I was like a little annoyed and frustrated, but then I thought, and I told him, like, I just really appreciate how generous you are.
Wonderful. And now, Jay, we need him to bake us cakes too. Oh, wonderful examples again. So yes, there are definitely ways that we can affirm that positive behavior, generosity, or being safe, right, in situations. So we're going to spend a little bit of time again developing statements that acknowledge our children in positive ways that can also be called positive reinforcement. And this is a powerful way for our children to learn and grow. And we'll talk about that more in just a minute. But now we're going to spend a little bit of time refining what communication could sound like when our children behave in ways we want them to continue, and also when they're behaving in ways that we want them to change. One tool that we can use is called I statements, and using I statements like the ones listed on this slide are a great way to begin communication with children when we're focusing on the lessons of health, safety, and the importance of relationships. So on the next slide, we're going to practice hearing what I statements could sound like in an effort to prevent the feelings of shame. Now, when children learn lessons, it can be a time of vulnerability. I think for all of us, we've been through that. And this can bring up feelings of shame. And shame is important to talk about and avoid for many reasons. Shame can lead to feelings of humiliation and worthlessness, discouraging children from taking risks and engaging in learning. It can also make them fearful of making mistakes. It can inhibit their growth and even result in defensive or withdrawn behavior. Now, while it might temporarily suppress unwanted actions or behaviors, shame does not effectively promote or positive behavioral change or resilience. So that's really important to know. And empathy, understanding, and positive reinforcement are much more effective for behavioral change and emotional well-being. Teaching children that mistakes are part of learning helps them develop resilience and a positive attitude, encouraging growth without shame. We all may have experiences with shame, whether it's because we experienced being shamed as a child ourselves, or even now as an adult. This conversation aims to acknowledge shame's presence due to historical trauma and to focus on making mindful parenting choices moving forward. So now let's practice hearing our I statements in action. Thank you. So for this slide, I'll need 2 volunteers. And each volunteer, hold on, Teresa, I'm glad you're ready, will be responsible for reading the statements on the slide. One for the instead of column, which are statements we want to move away from that may lead to feelings of shame. And another volunteer for the try column, which are statements that we are going to want to try and use instead. So Teresa's one of my volunteers. Natalie, you're the next. All right. So we're going to click through each of these. Ready? All right.
Don't be so emotional. Get over it.
I'm noticing some big emotions. Can you tell me what's going on?
What were you thinking?
I'm concerned about you. It's not like you to yell. I'm wondering what happened.
Thank you both. And great acting skills, by the way. So tell me, what is the difference between these 2 columns and the impact that this would have on a child?
Well, one thing I noticed was I feel like the try column that uses more of the I statements, it felt a lot more like caring and compassionate, and like they're kind of curious about how the other person's doing, or maybe like helping their defenses go down. Whereas like I notice when someone says more of the instead of column, I get a little more defensive.
Definitely. Thank you, Natalie. Any others? Deidre?
Yeah, kind of going off what Natalie said in the instead of column, when I would hear it, it felt like kind of that blame and shame. Like I felt like, oh, why am I being so emotional? Like,
Mhm.
oh, maybe I do need it, like that blame and shame and like a little bit of guilt. And then when I would hear like more things from the try column, like it felt more approachable. Like I could go up and talk more openly about what I was feeling versus feeling guilty for being so emotional. Like there's just a difference.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Deidre. I felt more supportive, right? Awesome, awesome. So in this next slide, again, we're going to have a chance to practice our own I statements. All right. So in a moment each, we're going to break you up into small groups. And if you'd like to turn to page G7 in your participant workbooks, we're going to have you pick 2 statements from the slide that you would like to practice with. And so you can find all of these statements listed on page G7. And we'll give you about 10 minutes to come up with your I statements. And let's start maybe with an example for the first statement. You never listen as an I statement might sound like, I notice you're having a hard time listening right now while I'm explaining something to you. Tell me what's going on. So if you get stuck, just do your best. We'll debrief as a group together afterwards and listen to some of your I statements. All right, everybody, I'm hearing some great conversations. Why don't we come back all together? Would anybody like to report out? Teresa.
The statement that I worked on was, what do you want from me? And changed it to, I'd like to know what you might need from me.
Wonderful. Great reframe right into that I statement. What I want to know what you would need from me. Wonderful. Deidre.
I started out really confused because I picked you never listen and I just entered I. So I was like, I never listen. And then I quickly realized like, well, that does probably is true, but that's probably not what my kids need to hear. So like you know, I feel like maybe you misunderstand what I'm asking or what I'm saying. Help me understand what you need right now. Something like that, like just to take away what we talked about earlier, like the blame and the shame or the guilt of however the person you're communicating with is experiencing it.
So some wonderful examples, and it takes some work, right? Because some of these things are just really quick to pop out from us, right? We might be frustrated in the moment. We might need things to be taking place, and we need things to happen now. But using those I statements really help move things along while keeping our children in that space of positive reinforcement, right? So wonderful, wonderful examples. All right. So in this next slide, we're going to be talking a little bit about elements of communication. There are many elements to effective communication, and we just practiced our approach, which was using I statements. We also talked about addressing our concern and connecting that concern to teachable moments, such as the importance of health, safety, and relationships. So we'll talk more about this here in a moment. In the middle of all of this, we have validation, which is where we can help our children feel seen and heard during difficult moments. We're going to spend some time right now developing a list of validating statements that center praise and empathy for our children. All right. I'd like you to open your workbook to page G8. We're going to spend about 10 minutes developing a list of statements that we could use in hard parenting moments. And we all have hard parenting moments at times. So during difficult parenting moments, what are some statements that are true and validating that could help a child feel seen and heard? Examples that we could share might be, you're an important member of our family. You are incredibly loved. I care about you and I care about your safety. So let's spend the next 10 minutes brainstorming as small groups, as many statements as you can come up with. And if you get stuck, think about what messages you would want your child to hear, or even messages you wish you had heard as a child. And before time is up, that list you brainstormed will put on a piece of chart paper. So be prepared to share your list with a large group. And we'll turn to our chart paper over here. All right, everyone, great conversations. I was hearing lots of folks talking about things that they already tell their children, that they would want to tell their children, and even some statements we wish we had heard as children ourselves. So would anybody like to share? Teresa.
We had really great discussion in our group, and I think we can all at least give a couple of examples that we came up with, because there was some really good discussion. I'll go ahead and start. One of the statements that we came up with was, I'm here for you no matter what. And then another one that we came up with is, you can talk to me about anything.
Wonderful, wonderful statements, and so important for our children to hear. We're here for them no matter what, and we are present with them at all times. Natalie.
A few that resonated with me and that I think would resonate with my child were, you're enough just as you are, and even when I'm upset, I still love you.
Wonderful, especially that second one, right? Because we might be upset, they might be upset, but we still have that love for them all the way through. Anyone else? Deidre?
Yeah, I'm sorry. One of the things that we talked about is like encouraging our kids to talk to us, like, and saying to them, like, if you don't tell me, I don't know how to help you or like how to guide you. Um, and so that, and then just reminding the kids, like, um, when I tell my kids, like, I love you so much, sometimes they joke back with me and say, like, what are the terms and conditions? And I say, none. My love comes anyway. And like, it's just, just to remind them, like, there's no fine print here. I just,
Exactly. It's unconditional, right? Wonderful. So thank you. Wonderful statements, right? That are really validating for all of our children. And they need to hear that. We needed to hear that. We still need to hear that as adults. So great examples. And thank you for this group reporting out, and for all the groups that spent some time working on this and reporting out some wonderful pieces that we have on our chart paper that you all shared. So I'm really looking forward to hearing more as we go forward. Okay, so next we're going to do some reflection on communication. And now that we've spent some time in our approach with I statements and statements of validation, we're going to spend some time talking about addressing our concerns. How can we communicate a concern to our child when something is not healthy or safe? For example, let's imagine when our child becomes frustrated and they throw their toys all over the room. I think any of us who have ever had toddlers know that what that's like. Our response might be, instead, I can see that you're upset and I noticed you threw your toys on the floor. I really care about how you feel. I don't want your toys to get stepped on or someone to get hurt. Can you tell me what's going on? So that might be one example. Another example might be that we're concerned about our child not wanting to go to bed. Our response might be, I noticed, I can see that you don't want to go to bed yet. You have a big day tomorrow, and I want to make sure you get enough sleep so your body isn't tired. It's a nice feeling to want to keep having fun with your siblings, but what do we need to do now to get ready for bed? So these are a few examples. Each of you will have 5 minutes to think about one example where you have a concern about your child. Think of a challenge that's simple or common. We're not going to get to major ones. We're just trying this on for the moment. Each of you will work independently in your workbook. So turn to page G9 and come up with what you might say to address your concern with your child by focusing on their health, their safety, and the importance of relationships. When the 5 minutes is up, you'll have some time to move into your small groups to go around and report out for about 10 minutes together. And if you're stuck on coming up with ideas, some other examples of common concerns might be your child is using the internet without your permission and you're concerned for their safety. Or your child is teasing a sibling and you're concerned about healthy relationships between the two of them. Another one might be your child is refusing to eat. You're concerned for their health. Or your child didn't do their homework and you're concerned for their health and their relationship with their teachers. So these are a few examples that we might consider and think about that our children might be experiencing. So take some time for these few minutes to work on your own in your workbook, and then we'll come together as a small group in just a moment. All right, everybody, our 10 minutes is up. Suzanne and I were hearing some wonderful examples. And I think as parents, we've all been there. So it's really neat to hear some of these. So for the sake of time, let's take at least just 2 or 3 examples that we can share with the larger group all together. Would anybody like to start off with one? Deidre.
Yeah, we were talking about some of us have teenagers, and we're talking about when teenagers get into the vehicle, like drive with their friends or take off without permission, like all of those things. And we're thinking like, um, I like telling our kids, like, I just want you to know, like, if you're ever unsure, if you ever have a question about being picked up, like, you can call me at any time, anywhere. I will drop whatever I'm doing because you are important to me. Your safety is important to me. And I love you that much that I want to make sure you come home or get to where you need to be. Like, I think it's really important that kids know that as they're trying out their independence, that we're going to be there as parents.
Exactly.
That's what we talked about.
Wonderful example, Deidre. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Teresa.
Yeah, and we talked about that when young people are around, our grandparents, that sometimes it can get a little bit rowdy when, in fact, we need to be a little calmer in with our grandparents. And I want you to have fun. But I also want everyone in the room to feel comfortable. And so I'm wondering, can we think about how to show our excitement in a way that's also respectful?
Wonderful. See, these were great conversations everyone was having. These are great examples. Anyone else? One more. Natalie.
Yeah, another thing that we talked about was how sometimes like teasing will happen in our families or amongst our kids. So we talked about it like maybe approaching with an I statement. Like I noticed that you were teasing your sibling, and I think you were trying to be funny and have fun, and I want you to have a good time with your sibling and be able to laugh together. But it also looked like they were maybe upset and uncomfortable. And so I'm wondering if we can figure out for next time how to make everyone feel safe and respected.
Wonderful. So wonderful examples and things we have really all been through within our families, right? With our children, things that we're having to think about for younger kids, teenagers, all really good examples. So thanks everybody for such hard work working through this part. We've worked on I statements, we've worked on trying them on, and we've tied them into this concept of that health, safety, and relationships and respect. I'm going to turn it over to Suzanne for the next portion.
All right. And our next portion is our last portion. And you all know that we finish in each way or in the same way each time. And so again, I want to reiterate what Jennifer is saying. Thank you so much for your incredible work in your small groups, individually and together as a large group today. All of your participation has helped co-create such an amazing space for learning. You know that we do a final activity before we review our homework and wrap up. And as you know, in past sessions and in this session, as well as in our last session, it can bring up emotions. At times it can feel heavy to discuss some of the things that we've been talking about, even if we're having a good time. And so in order to take care of ourselves, we always come back to identifying resources and activities for self-care at the end of each session. So go ahead and open up your workbooks to page G10. And I want you to take a moment to write down the answer to the prompts that are listed here. If I need support, who's a person that I can reach out to and talk to? What's an activity I can do for self-care? What's a resource I can use if I need support or help? And if you need support with some of those answers, feel free to go back to some of the discussions that we've had in previous sessions about each of these. Go ahead and take a moment and fill those out. All right. Now, I'm going to be going into our final slide, our closing, and you can follow along on pages G10 and G11 in your participant workbook. Again, Thank you so much for all of your work in this module. What I'd like for us to do now is review our homework. So starting on page G10, I'm going to be asking for you all as a part of your homework to write down one way that I will practice an I statement will be, and then think about using our communication skills and validation statements from today. One way that I will practice an I statement will be, and then think about how we can use our communication skills and validation statements. The second part of your homework will be writing a story for our children. So you might remember earlier in our session today when we talked about storytelling to teach lessons, on page G11 in your workbook, we're going to be asking you to choose a brief story, and you will write that down, what you would like to share with your children now or in the future. This can be as simple and brief as remembering the first day of school or how your child got their name. What memory or story would you like your child to learn about? Sometimes as parents, we don't think of ourselves as storytellers, but everyone does have a story to tell. We have memories and life lessons we gather as caregivers of our children that we can share with them. And over time, we become the next generation of knowledge keepers. So why not make it a good story? So go ahead and take a moment to think about how you'll be doing that homework. And then I've just got a couple reminders before we wrap up. All right. Remember that next session is our final session, and we are asking you all to bring something that reminds you of your child or your children. So this can be a picture, a favorite toy, artwork done by them. And during our final session, these items will be used to bring your child or children into the space as we wrap up our training series and our time together. I'll be sharing with you all, and Jennifer will be as well, some community and resources that you all can take with you. And before we leave, the last thing that we're going to be asking you all to do is to fill out the exit ticket. So you might have noticed that Jennifer and I put exit tickets on your table. Really quickly, I want to remind you as you're filling those out, we're looking for an overall reaction to the class, and there's some emojis there that can help guide your reaction to the class, something new that you learned, something I want to learn more about in the future, a question I still have from today's session if you have one, and then there's a space to share any other ideas or feedback. The last question on the card asks if follow-up is needed. If the answer is yes, turn the exit ticket over and please indicate for us what kind of support or follow-up would be helpful. All right, everyone. Thank you so much again. Jennifer and I are so excited about the work that was done today and coming back together for our final session next week. Please take good care.
Thank you, everybody.